The restaurant went silent the moment the chair scraped loudly across the polished floor. Heads turned, forks paused in midair, and a frightened gasp escaped from a young woman sitting at a corner table. 3 well-dressed men stood over her, their faces twisted with anger and arrogance. The woman's hands trembled as they grabbed her shoulders, their voices sharp and threatening. No one moved. No one spoke. The entire room seemed frozen, until a quiet man at a nearby table slowly stood up. Before we begin this emotional story, if you believe that kindness, courage, and second chances still exist in this world, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories. The man who stood up looked ordinary at first glance. He wore a simple dark shirt, worn jeans, and the tired expression of someone who had lived through more than most people could imagine. His name was Daniel Carter, a single father who had spent the last 5 years raising his young daughter alone. His life was quiet now, simple, and often lonely. Nights were spent helping with homework, making cheap dinners, and reading bedtime stories. The past he once lived felt like another lifetime, one he rarely spoke about. But tonight, something inside him refused to stay silent. Daniel had been sitting alone, waiting for his takeout order, when he noticed the men surrounding the young woman. At first, he tried to ignore it. People often told themselves that situations like this were none of their business. But when one of the men grabbed the woman's arm too tightly and she winced in pain, Daniel's chest tightened. It reminded him of something he had promised himself years ago, that he would never again stand by while someone weaker was being hurt. The restaurant lights reflected off the polished floor as Daniel calmly walked toward the table. The 3 men barely noticed him at first, too focused on intimidating the woman. But when Daniel stepped closer, his presence interrupted their circle. His voice was steady, low, and firm as he asked them to let her go. The men laughed. One of them stepped forward, clearly annoyed. He looked Daniel up and down, judging him as nothing more than another stranger trying to play hero. The man shoved Daniel's shoulder slightly, telling him to mind his own business. Around them, diners looked away nervously. No one wanted to get involved. But Daniel didn't move. There was something different about the way he stood. His posture was calm, balanced, almost practiced. His eyes carried a quiet determination that made the air feel heavy with tension. The young woman looked at him with a mix of fear and disbelief, as if she couldn't understand why a stranger would risk stepping into something dangerous for her. Then the situation escalated. One of the men raised his fist and pushed Daniel again, harder this time. The shove caused Daniel's sleeve to pull slightly up his forearm. Under the restaurant lights, dark ink appeared against his skin. A tattoo. It wasn't flashy or decorative. It was simple, bold, and unmistakable. Navy. For a brief moment, everything changed. The man who had been acting the most aggressive suddenly froze. His eyes dropped to the tattoo, and the confidence in his face faded. His expression shifted into something closer to recognition, and then uncertainty. The others followed his gaze, noticing the same mark. The room was silent again. But this silence felt different. Daniel noticed their reaction but said nothing. His arm lowered naturally, the tattoo still partially visible. For him, the mark was not something he showed off. It was a memory, a reminder of the years he had spent serving in places where courage and sacrifice were not optional. Years where protecting others had been his duty. Years that had also taken more from him than most people could understand. The men exchanged nervous glances. Suddenly, the balance of power in the room shifted. The arrogance that had filled their voices only moments before was gone. One of them stepped back slightly, pretending to adjust his jacket as if he had lost interest. Another muttered something under his breath. Without another word, they slowly released the woman and backed away. Within seconds, they were gone. The restaurant breathed again. The young woman sat there in shock, her eyes wide as she tried to process what had just happened. Daniel didn't look for praise or applause. He simply nodded to her gently, making sure she was okay. His expression softened for a moment before he turned to leave, planning to return to his quiet life like nothing had happened. But fate had other plans. As Daniel walked toward the exit, an older man seated near the door stood up slowly. His gaze was fixed on Daniel's arm, where the navy tattoo had been visible just moments earlier. The man's eyes filled with emotion as recognition dawned across his face. He stepped closer, his voice trembling slightly as he asked Daniel where he had served. Daniel hesitated. Memories flashed through his mind. Long nights on ships surrounded by dark oceans. The brotherhood of soldiers who had become family. And the day everything changed, the day he lost his wife while he was overseas, leaving him alone to raise their daughter. But the older man's eyes carried something deeper than curiosity. They carried gratitude. Before Daniel could answer, the man placed a hand on his shoulder and quietly revealed something that stunned the entire room. Years ago, during a rescue mission in dangerous waters, a Navy team had saved his son's life after a terrible accident at sea. His son had survived because of those brave sailors. And now, standing in front of him, was one of them. Tears filled the man's eyes as he thanked Daniel for his service, not just for his country, but for the lives he had protected. The restaurant that had once been silent with fear now watched with respect and admiration. Daniel stood there quietly, humbled by the moment. For years, he had believed his past only carried pain and loss. He had focused solely on being a good father to his daughter, believing that was the only mission that mattered anymore. But in that restaurant, surrounded by strangers, he was reminded that courage never disappears. It lives in small choices. In moments when someone decides to stand up for another human being. And sometimes, all it takes is one brave act to remind the world that heroes don't always wear uniforms, sometimes they are just single fathers trying to do the right thing. Before this story ends, I have a small request. Please comment the word respect below if you believe people like Daniel deserve appreciation for their courage and kindness. And if this story touched your heart even a little, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who needs inspiration today, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us how much good still exists in this world.